Hello, everyone. I'm Marianne Jett, and I'm here today with Joshua Henslee from Silicon Valley. And well, welcome, Joshua. I'm so excited to meet you.
Yep,
How are you
thanks.
doing?
Pretty good. You?
Oh, doing well. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what you've been working on, what you're doing, and I know you got a lot of projects that you're working on as far as it relates to Bitcoin SV. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yep, sure. So I've been working at a Microsoft partner who implements enterprise resource planning or ERP systems. So the system that we resell is called Microsoft Dynamics 365. So I've been working there since I graduated out of school, so about 7 years now. I'm originally from Atlanta, but I moved to Silicon Valley about a year and a half ago. But I didn't start paying attention to Bitcoin until late 2017, like a lot of people when they saw the huge price run up. And because I'm pretty technical, started looking into how it works, the technology behind it, how fast it is. I've been pretty obsessed with it over the past year. And then when we saw that you can put data inside of a transaction, the use cases with that and the ERP system and marrying those two together is fascinating to me. So been working to figure out, okay, what's the best touch point to integrate those two.
Mm-hmm. And so you're working with the ERP system now with Microsoft, with the software of Microsoft?
Yeah, so since we're a partner, we resell Microsoft's ERP system. So we help them facilitate the sales of their product. And then we're a consulting firm that goes in and implements. So we staff the projects, we write the statements of work. So we'll staff the project with, X number of consultants, and those projects can range from 3 months to 2 years, typically.
Mm-hmm. And what's the name of the Microsoft software?
It's Microsoft Dynamics 365.
Okay.
So it used to be called AX. So it went under a huge rebranding about 3 years ago. And that's the same time they moved to a completely cloud architecture. Before it was application based, it would be hosted by the customers typically.
Mm-hmm. And does that also have a relation to, the Microsoft 365, like, because I use that as well for a lot of, storing my data and Microsoft Word, Excel, Outlook. So is that related to it in any way?
Yeah, so Office 365 does have a strong integration with Dynamics 365. So you can export data into Excel or Word or whatever, and then republish that back into the ERP. So let's say if you're doing, say, a bunch of sales lines, you could just poke those out into Excel, type them all back in, and push it back. Mm-hmm. So it does have strong integration with those platforms.
And I heard that there's some good news that you just heard recently about Coingeek. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So originally I was going to kind of expand on my Yours article about Unwriter's tools at our San Francisco meetup. But I had the opportunity to reach out to Steve Shatters, who's looking for presenters, and I ended up getting invited to present at the Developers Day for Coingeek. So really excited about that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So when is that exactly? When is the Coingeek Conference? It's in May?
It's from May 29th through the 30th, and I'll be doing the presentation on Developers Day.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Which is the 29th, and the main conference is on the 30th.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's so exciting. Oh, wow. So, well, congratulations for that. So we'll be definitely looking forward to hearing your presentation. So it's going to be about Unwriter's, a lot of the projects that he or she has come up with, and just kind of bringing it down to a level where people can really understand it. Is that kind of the for what you'll...
Yeah, that's right. So the intent behind that Yours article that's already outdated that I wrote was to break it down into terms that, non-technical people can kind of understand. Because I think a lot of people were looking at that and thinking, oh, wow, whoever this person is releasing so much cool stuff. But what does it actually do, right? How can I use it? And so the point of it was to show, number one, that you don't have to be super technical to pick up some of that stuff and start building. the second piece is, you know, to kind of just articulate what, okay, yeah, it's cool to say, okay, BitDB, whatever, bottle, all this stuff, but, you know, what can it actually do, right? What are some real use cases or some even theoretical ones that could be used with his tools?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a fantastic article. I actually read it. I remember one of the last shows that we did. I don't know if it was with Raina that I was with. Maybe it was with Raina, and I remember talking a little bit about your article because I was like, wow, this is a great article because it explains everything, you know, in a real quick and general way of what Unwriter is doing and what, you know, what each one does, you know, BitDB, what is that? Chronos, you know, Babel, you know, all these, you know, things. And so I thought that was great. And then I thought, wow, I wonder if there's another yours article out there or something where, because I know that was a little bit ago, you know, and so to have an updated version of, you know, everything, including what you had before, but all the new things that the Unwriter has come up with as far as Planaria and, you know, all these other things. So basically that's, you know, like, oh, wow, this is great because you'll be talking about it at Coingeek. You'll be the one to watch when, for everybody who wants to know, like, what in the world is Unwriter doing? And like, so for people who could truly understand. So do you plan on doing a yours article as well on that too? Like adding?
I will probably just release the PowerPoint after Coingeek to the public. That's what I'll do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fantastic. So, so you're working on a lot of projects. I remember that that I even talked about that a little bit on the last show. That you've been working on like an EDI project and a one-page checkout, and, you know, some other things. And so, why don't you explain a little bit about, you know, some of the projects that you're working on, and that'd be great to hear.
Yep. So in my obsession, so in my free time, because of, you know, with a full-time job, I've been playing around to see, okay, how can I map some of these tools out there like Money Button, Hand Cash, Unwriter stuff to actually build something that people could use to make money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in my job, I have a retail focus. So most of my projects have been with retail clients. So either call center, credit cards, point of sale, that sort of thing. So web integrations as well. So, you know, if they're running a website, they usually integrate that with the ERP system. But when we saw that we could start putting entire websites on chain, I became fascinated. Okay, how do I host a web page from the chain and sell some item and make money, right, and get paid through Money Button? So that was the motivation behind the one-page checkout. It's really just a mechanism. If you wanted to start selling stuff, you could just have a very simple HTML web page, pay 2 pennies to upload it to the blockchain, and then accept payment, right? There's still some things that need to be done to get it to where it's truly usable. But if you wanted something simple, you could do that. So that was the motivation behind that yours post. Really the gaps it fills are, you know, with Money Button, the merchant pays no fees, right? Because the person just swipes, they pay the minor fee and that's it. So you take the full cut. Unlike if you're hosting a web shop, you know, you got to pay your monthly service fees and you got to pay PayPal fees, credit card fees, whatever, right? And then I just wanted to demonstrate, okay, you know, it's on chain, right? So it's there forever. No one can take it down. You don't have to pay a fee. It's just there and anyone can access it. So now you open up all this access to people, you know, all around the world to sell whatever you have.
So I'd like to go over that, the EDI project. You've got a proof of concept for EDI 850 transaction from Dynamics 365 ERP. And so is that when you say that it's kind of related to Dynamics 365 ERP, it's actually related to that software?
Right. So what I did with that was I just wrote a simple, I use Bitpipe, so that's one of Unwriter's tools where you can just have kind of that instance running on a machine, and then it could take any type of request. So most programs, almost all programming languages, you can implement just web requests.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I didn't have to do anything Bitcoin specific in the ERP to integrate with my Bitpipe. So I was able to easily send data from the ERP to the blockchain just by doing that. And what I decided to do was just morph a purchase order into a typical EDI standard, which is the 850 document.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty simple. Yes, here's the article. So I just started with creating a purchase order in the ERP. If you could scroll down a little bit.
Okay, yeah, let's see. So this is yours article on your EDI proof of concept here. You can see it.
Yep, so here's screenshots of the actual ERP. So here's a purchase order screen. I just had a simple one line for some mugs.
And this is it right here, right in this here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is me manually keying the PO in the system. And then I just have another screenshot down here where I attach a note, and I actually implemented that in the EDI, because there's a place in the standard where you can specify shipping notes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And if you keep scrolling down, in the ERP, to whenever the user is ready to send the purchase order to their vendor, there's a confirmation function in the system. So this is a mandatory step in the ERP. So they just click that, and then that's where I implemented to actually send that to the blockchain. Mm-hmm. So you can see down here, I have the well-formed EDI 850 in the op return. And so in theory, the other side, the vendor would pick that up and then import that into their system and process it versus getting some file or having some third party help them do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recognize these. Is it called the ST segment right here? Mm-hmm. Because, well, with my business, my company is Premier Medical Inc. So we're a healthcare provider where we provide durable medical equipment to patients. So we send claims to the health insurance companies like Medicare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare. So we send EDI transactions to health insurance companies. So I've kind of dealt with it before where, the claims, it's the 837s, that's the ANSI X12 837s, and it's the 5010 format for outpatient, because we're outpatient, we're not a hospital. So this is why it's always been kind of intriguing to hear a little bit about EDI, because I use it in my business. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is a $14 trillion, market. It's a big market, and not many people really talk about that. I mean, a lot of people do talk about, using, Bitcoin, which is BSV, obviously, right? That we're talking about, that, you can use it for just simple, sending money back and forth. But there's so much more that you can do with Bitcoin BSV, for business to business transactions, where I think that's where the volume is really going to come in. You know how we talk about with the miners and how we've got the halving coming up. And so the rewards are going to be less, the subsidy. And so we, in order to have Bitcoin be sustainable, we need to replace the subsidy that's being reduced, or the halving, with transactions. And for transaction fees. And I believe that with things like EDI and all these other business to business type of things and transactions, that's where the volume is really going to come in, and it's going to really grow. And I mean, even EDI, that's like Swift, right? For banking, that's also EDI. Yeah. Swift, that's another format, right? Because you've got like ANSI X12, which is what I use for my business. And that's kind of what you're using as well for this particular, your EDI format, right? You're using the ANSI X12 as well. Mm-hmm. So, but then you've also got other formats too, like Swift is another format, right? Mm-hmm. And that's for banking. That's giant. And so then you've also got, was it Edifact and some other ones? Yeah. But yeah, the ANSI X12 is the big one. And when you think about some of the big ones, I mean, like, what about Walmart? I mean, that is like real world, thinking about how much Walmart EDI transactions they're doing. I don't know how much, but do you know anything about what they're doing? Amazon, same thing. I don't know if they do that, but do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so Walmart does use that. I've actually personally seen it in the frozen food industry. So they use that with their sales orders, right? So what they do is, because they're so big, they can just enforce all their vendors to just use that standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not like these little companies who are much smaller than Walmart are going to be able to push back. They're just going to have to say, okay, sure, fine, right? And they're using that the 850 document. So it's an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it works now is, with what they do is, they could just exchange that document peer to peer. That's one way they could do it, but very few actually implement it that way. Typically, they have a third party who takes that document and then transforms it into a format that the other side system can accept. So whether that's XML, CSV, that format, or whatever. So that's usually what we've worked with in the past, is we have to send it to a third party, and then they morph it into that standard you just showed on the screen, and then into the vendors or the customer system to accept it.
I see. So now, are you talking about the clearinghouse? Is that the third party?
No, I mean the person who's sitting in the middle and morphing the document, because most systems like Dynamics, for example, out of the box, it can't accept that format that you just showed. It can't accept that. It would have to accept XML or something like that. So what these third parties would do is they would get that document, say from Walmart, transform it to an XML, and then push it to Dynamics, because Dynamics can accept that.
Okay.
And if you really think about it, most systems are built to accept maybe one or two formats. So in order to accept something completely different, they'd have to build that. They'd have to code that from scratch, which is costly.
Okay. I just know, for example, with my business and when the way we use EDI, we have a certain format that we use on our software, and then we sent it. A lot of times, there's different ways, but one of the ways is to send it to a clearinghouse, and then and they have a electronic payer ID for that specific insurance company.
Okay. Yeah.
There's all these different electronic payer IDs that each insurance company has. So Blue Cross will have this one, Aetna will have this one, and so we basically send it to the clearinghouse with that payer ID as the ID, and then that clearinghouse just simply forwards it on to the health insurance company without having the need to translate it, like you're saying, because you're saying it kind of needs to be translated, in at least in regards to retail, I guess, and with ERP systems.
Or any, it's not industry specific. So I can speak to one of the clients I was on. They would have to export XML, and the third party would take that, morph it to whatever Walmart, Costco, whoever these guys need. And typically it would be what we just showed. It would be that standard.
And the other thing is because, like when we send our Medicare claims, we have a direct connection to Medicare, and it's just like, it just gets sent. Like there's no conversion or anything. So I'm just wondering if that, maybe that's something different. But
I'll bet your system is outputting it in the format that Medicare expects with the standard. So there's no need to transform it.
Okay, I see. So, but for retail, for the most part, Walmart, Amazon, all these, types of places, they usually need to format it or change it to.
Especially if one of their suppliers is putting in a new system, which is what we do. So typically we just use the tools that we have, but that usually involves a third-party service. So I think one of the gaps that can be filled with Bitcoin is to remove that, or make it much cheaper, because they have to pay those guys just like they pay us. Because we're consultants, we're billable. So those guys are also billable. And in my opinion, there's technology, we already know with Bitcoin out there, that can replace those guys, or at least make them much cheaper. So I think that's one of the big value propositions that the chain brings, is to kind of streamline some of this. Now, with that said, there's a lot of work to get there. But to your point about the transaction volume, all it's going to take is for some company that's using this to actually use this and see, oh, I can get rid of these middlemen, right? And I can just start using the chain. You can imagine how many transactions that it just take all their orders that they do a day, and now that's all volume on the chain.
And they can save a lot amount of money. I mean, they can save a lot by using Bitcoin SV to do that on chain,
Also,
right? Compared to
right, the fees would be much lower, but also they don't have to pay those guys for support anymore. I mean, this might be a bit idealistic, but it would be so much easier to troubleshoot this stuff because a lot of it is black box today, meaning in that transform piece I talked about, no customer or vendor on either side can actually see what's going on. So they have to reach out to them to say, hey, what's going on? And, work with their support. That's a bunch of time wasted, right? If it's on the chain, you can just go look, oh, okay, I know exactly what the problem is. And then they work together to figure it out. So instead of having this middleman in the system siphoning all this value, you bring it back to a truly peer-to-peer transaction, right? And that's where the value comes in because you save money.
Because it's an open ledger too. I mean, so you can actually have access to that, and each side, so you don't have to, like you said, deal with that issue.
Right. And ideally, you would want to encrypt the data because that's a big concern of these big businesses is, they don't want to put their clear text on chain because then you can see, you start revealing who some of these companies' suppliers are, and that's obviously not going to fly.
And so you were talking about it would be good to encrypt the data, and I believe in your article you were talking about, let me see if I can find it on your, let's see, the EDI. You were talking about how you would use, can you see here? Let's see. I don't know if this is the one. When we're back in the EDI. Oh, that's the one-page checkout, actually. Right. Let me go back. You were going to use some technology from, possibly nChain, right, to help encrypt the data or make it more private, I think.
So Craig Wright wrote a very relevant post on how this would actually be implemented, and it seems like they have a patent out there that would enable this. Without getting too much into detail, the cryptography and the encryption of it, it basically just gives a means for two parties to exchange a document in a private manner.
Do you see this screen where it's got like Craig Wright's avatar here? Right. And it says, taking money over the web using Bitcoin the way it was designed?
Yep.
Oh, you can see that. Okay. So I think this is, let me bring this down here actually. So you can see, this is what you link to from your EDI, yours article, and how you basically would use, I believe, the determining a common secret for the secure exchange of information, deterministic cryptographic keys. So this is kind of the technology that can be utilized with the EDI systems, project that you're working on to help with keeping it more private and encrypted, or what exactly is it doing by using that technology?
Yes, so it solves that problem of putting a clear text EDI document on the chain. So it would just provide a mechanism for two parties to transact securely and privately. So you would be able to send that EDI document to your vendor, and that no one else is going to be able to see it but the vendor. And to get on my soapbox a little bit, what Craig is doing with this stuff adds value. I mean, if someone can take that and implement it, I mean, I've actually shown that article to people, directors in my company, and they get it. Like they see, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So when people talk about, with the whole thing going on with he's such a fraud and all this stuff, none of that matters, man. If you're adding value, right, with what he's doing, because like that, I wouldn't have been able to figure that out by myself, right? I mean, I'm not a cryptographer, but he's just laying it out. Okay, this is how you do it. Oh, great. This solves a real business use case. And I think that's what's really going to drive the value of SV is the value proposition is going to be so overwhelming that these guys just can't refuse. They can't pass it up because everyone likes profits.
And it seems like because the nChain is spending a lot of money into, IP, intellectual property, and patents, and all these ways to be able to do these things, like that particular IP that we were just discussing of
Right.
Dr. Craig Wright, so that you and other people don't have to spend millions of dollars trying to come up with a way to make it more secure. It can be used, as, basically for free, royalty free.
Yes.
And so for people like you can just focus on what you do best, which is, I guess coding, right? Is that what you do? You're a coder, basically?
Kind of. I'm more of a, like, what we call it a technical lead. So when we staff projects, we put our team on site. We usually put one technical person that can actually talk to the client. It's, not a head in the sand coder, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do some coding on the side, and sometimes I have to do it on our projects.
Mm-hmm.
But to what you were just talking about with the IP, so a good example of that is when because he actually tweeted about the article we just discussed, the one I wrote.
The EDI one.
Yes.
That's how I first found out about it, because I saw that Craig Wright had tweeted it out, and I'm like, I got to read this. I'm like, oh, wow, this is interesting. This pertains to my business in a way. I use this. Uh-huh.
And someone actually replied on there saying, doesn't this infringe on your patents? And then he replied and said, no, because it's on Bitcoin SV.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's true. So, and you're building on Bitcoin SV. So, I mean, that's the point. Is that what they were trying to make? Is that, are you, Joshua, infringing on the patent by you're intending on using, this patent, the determining of a common secret for exchange, but you're saying no, because you're building on SV, so it's royalty free.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And that's the benefit. I think there's a lot of value in Bitcoin SV because of a lot of the intellectual property that's out there that's going to be utilized. And I think that, some of these trolls and whoever else, they have their agenda and they need to promote this and that, but I think that really the people who are really working and providing real use cases, building on Bitcoin SV, like yourself, you're more about utilizing what makes sense. Hey, if there's IP that's going to work and you don't have to pay and spend all the millions of dollars to develop it, to make your project successful, that's what you're going to use. And if it's going to scale, because at Bitcoin SV, they're all, the focus is to scale unbounded, unbounded scale. So massive scale where it will, it will be able to handle the volume. Because when you think about all the volume, Walmart and all these places, that's some big volume. You just get Walmart, one company, utilizing EDI, $14 trillion market in general. It's like once one company like Walmart gets on board, you need the volume. Look, we've already hit 128 megabytes on chain right now, just with like Ryan Charles, uploading some photos. In fact, you've uploaded some photos too that we'll have to go over in a minute as well. But from Italy and such, which is I thought those were really nice. But so for people to sit there and say we don't need scale, 32 is fine. Yeah. Look, that was just a few months ago that Bitcoin Cash is like, we don't need more than 32 megabytes. And look at it now, where it's like just the other, stress tests, like, whoops, we got 128, like at least twice we've got 128 megabyte blocks filled. So we need to scale. So Bitcoin SV is the one for that. And then I also think that Bitcoin SV is great because it is, it's going to be a stable protocol, and everybody knows. It's like, everybody knows, and it's like something that, you're not going to have to be worried about a protocol changing, right? Do you think that's a benefit for somebody like you who's building an application that have a stable protocol like, what Bitcoin SV is doing, so you're not having to worry about that? Or I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, actually I could speak to that. So I would say October, I was looking to try to do a proof of concept with vendor invoicing in EDI. using some of Bitcoin.com's APIs to do it. And when this chain split happened, or this fork happened, it didn't work anymore, right? I can't use their stuff. I mean, you know, that's because they picked a side, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to use BCH to do it with the op return cap, right? I'm not going to do that. And I'm, you know, also I think that's all politics stuff, but but that's just to the point. It's right. If these tools are built on one chain and then that chain splits, how am I, you know, you can't tell the developer, okay, now you got to rewrite all your stuff. That's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And if you notice, after the first of the year, that's when Unwriter released all his stuff. I will bet, I don't know this, but I will bet that he's probably been working on some of that stuff, but he didn't take off until after SV was created because he knew, okay, now it's locked down, right? These guys have spent all this money defending this chain. You know, now I know I can release all the fruits of my labor, right? Mm-hmm. Because you saw, like, I think there was 1 week we saw 6 things in 6 days or something. Mm-hmm. I think he actually trolled the Coingeek account because they said it was 5 in 5 days, and he's like, I'm not done. But yeah, so I probably could have had that EDI thing done maybe last year, but after the fork, it just causes people to rewrite. And I'm just a person playing around. Imagine someone like nChain or Unwriter, right, who's actually building stuff. That's, you know, these guys' full-time jobs. I'm just messing around. If it affected me like that, imagine the impact it had on them. Mm-hmm. I also want to talk about the transaction thing too. Oh, so I just started a new project 2 months ago, and these guys, the clients, they bring up things that I think could be put on chain. But guess what? I can't even say it. Number one, I can't say, okay, you can use Bitcoin, because I'll be laughed at, first of all, right? Because of all the joke of the crypto space right now. That's number one. Number two is, even if I did provide a viable solution, the block size is too small, right? It can't. That's why it's so important to scale quickly, because even if let's say someone did convince a business to use, they can't even do it, because if there's a fear that they hit that cap and it becomes, you have an issue like BTC with huge fees, that's not going to be acceptable. So that's why it's so important. That's why it's a joke to keep it at 32 megabytes. That's a joke, right? It needs to go as high as possible, as fast as possible. Because if a business does start using it, it would be terrible if they hit the caps that's plagued BTC so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's so important. I mean, we've already hit it now. So, I mean, we need to increase that, which is a good thing. And that's like you said, with real world cases, you know, people like yourself, that's what's important. Not necessarily what, you know, some trolls trying to, you know, say about BTC to put on something like Lightning that still doesn't work, and you still have to be online. And also, isn't that there's some benefit there as far as, I mean, you look at Lightning, you have to be online pretty much to do certain things.
Accept the payment, which
and so
not going to work either.
Wouldn't that be horrible to do your? It just seems like that would not work that well for your project, to have to be required to be online, and then
Right, because if you do it on chain, it's, it's there. So even if someone sends you a message, in the manner that we talked about, your message is there privately forever, and it's there. With Lightning, to tell a business that they need to be online. I mean, for example, you could just, the point of sale example. So in Dynamics, they have a point of sale module. It actually has offline functionality, because they know that the store's internet might go out or the power might go down, but that doesn't mean they need to stop taking orders, right? Imagine you're in New York City, you're a big retailer. If your internet goes out, are you going to tell all your customers to leave? No, you're going to keep taking orders, right? So it has that functionality to where you can still key in orders, and then when the system comes back up, it'll batch them and push them into the ERP, right? So this idea that you need to be online to accept payment, no, that's ridiculous. Never accept that.
Yeah, that's absurd. So, I mean, I think that what's going to really happen is that people like yourself who are really working on projects, people like Unwriter, you and others, you know, they've realized the benefit of unbounded scale from Bitcoin SV and the stable protocol that's predictable. You know what it's going to be. You don't have to keep changing, because like you said, I mean, by being on BCH, for example, wouldn't you, because they kind of changed the protocol with DSV, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about the changing the CTOR. I don't know if CTOR is changing the protocol too, but
it's a change.
It's a change. So you would have had to like redo some things on your software too, right? Or a little bit?
Not on my side, because I was just doing requests and response type of thing. But I do know, I mean, there's a Medium post by Ari. He's a guy over Sharkpool. Who he talks specifically about how that messed, whatever he was working on, that messed him up, the CTOR piece.
I see. Now, you were also, I've heard a lot about, like Dr. Craig Wright talking about, you know, logistics and, you know, how EDIs can really be beneficial. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about, you know, logistics and how this may integrate with what project you're working on?
Yes. So in the example about the one-page checkout, so I know we spoke briefly before this meeting about how that's more unique, but it does actually relate a bit to EDI. Because whenever they swipe the button to check out, I'm actually writing the shipment info to the chain. So
here it is. Do you see it right here? The one-page checkout using hand cash and money button? Okay.
Yes. So if you could scroll down a bit to where you see the shipping information.
Okay, let's see here. Duck creation, one-page checkout.
If you keep going.
Joshua Henslee. Keep going?
Yes.
Keep going.
To where it's a what's on chain screenshot. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So if you notice, I actually wrote the shipping info, the quantity, all that stuff in the op return. So this could be extended to, if there was a supplier that's received this, they would have the message instantly, right? Now those guys can get their shipment out instantly. So that's one issue that we typically face today is, you know, we use FedEx and UPS or whatever. But, you know, and even a lot of companies are still emailing this type of stuff to their vendors. Even the client I'm on now, that's how they do it today, right? That's one of the reasons we're putting the ERP in. I mean, if you think about it, that's not a sound way to do business, right?
Right.
But this would be much better. So, you know, you swipe the button and there's no one actually having to email it. You have the info here. You have the shipping info. If it could be sent securely and quick to whoever's shipping the product, think how much faster they could get that out, right? They could get it out the door. And then they have an incentive to do so as well, because you could pay them quicker. So if they're able to receive the document faster, and then they can receive payment for your shipment faster, then now they can be much more efficient. So now they can get more shipments out the door, right? And they get more money. So these are the type of things that Bitcoin can do is, you know, that's just one scenario. So one thing I can say is that, so I know I shill the duck creation all the time. That's actually my girlfriend's website. She's running a little tiny project where one of the guys I host a meetup with, Sonu, he has a print shop out here. So they could, in effect, put this into practice, right? So when she takes, say, for her stickers or whatever on the site, you could put in the money button to send him that transaction as well, right? To pay him, but also send him the shipping info. So then as for him, in my, you know, whatever wallet he's using, he could just go look at the transaction. Okay, I got all the shipment info. Now I can just get it out the door, done. Instead of her having to email it or whatever.
So it seems kind of seamless, you know, kind of integrated into it all. Oh, wow. Okay. So, and then, so is there anything else about the one-page checkout using hand cash and money button that's kind of interesting about it, or?
I think that's it. It's just a quick way for people to accept payments. It's more of a proof of concept, but it's just and just demonstrating how extensible it is and how it could just streamline business processes.
Okay. And does that one-page checkout, it doesn't really relate to EDI, at least to your ERP system as much, does it? Or
Not to the ERP, but like I mentioned, it could be that document I write, that could very well be an EDI document that you send to some supplier.
I see.
But I created my own format in this example.
So these are all proof of concepts. You've got the EDI project, the one-page checkout project. I mean, you've written code for it, right? I mean, quite a bit. I mean, how far is it as far as, well, let's say with as far as the EDI, how far have you gotten, and what have you done, and what is still needs to be done?
Well, with that, yeah, like you mentioned, it was just a proof of concept, so not that much code. It only works in some local environment I have. It definitely couldn't be used in production or anything like that. But on the side, I am working on something like but this is still another proof of concept, but one that I could actually show to my practice. So we're involved a bit in blockchain, but it's stuff like Hyperledger and all that sort of thing. But I'm working on something that could potentially be shown to them that can show two ERP systems interacting with just the streamlined data process. So, do AR on one side and accounts payable on the other, and just close the loop. So, send the invoice or whatever, it'd be paid on the other side, and the actual payment would be in Bitcoin. But that's something that I am trying to work on. But we'll see. Time is short, so we'll see what happens over the next few weeks.
Oh, wow. That's exciting. And so that utilizes, I guess, the ERP system, which is the Microsoft 365 Dynamics system, right?
Yes, I would have two instances of that talking to each other in effect, but I would be leveraging Bitcoin.
Oh, wow. So you're saying accounts payable and accounts receivable, and kind of like
yeah.
So for example, can you give us an example of maybe a Walmart or a retailer, and what the retailer is doing and what they're using over here and what software, and then the other side, can you give us an example of how that would be real world?
Sure. So for a frozen foods company I was working for, I was doing kind of staff augmentation there. They had an existing EDI integration to like Walmart, Costco. What would happen is they were running AX, so the previous version of the ERP. And when they would enter in, let's see, I'm trying to think of how this worked. They would actually receive.
They meaning the frozen food company.
That's right.
Okay.
They would receive EDI documents, but in a format that Dynamics can accept, which is at the time only XML. But in our example, we showed that was more of a flat file. It was like text written line by line. That's the standard. But the ERP can't accept that unless you modify it to do that. But out of the box, it can accept an XML document. So what happens is we have to integrate with a third party that sits in the middle and transforms the doc received from Walmart into the XML. And then the client usually ends up having to pay that bill to the third party. So it's black box, so to speak, meaning that the client doesn't have access to that third party server, so they have to reach out for them to troubleshoot issues because they're doing that transform, right? The only reason that exists today is because most of these clients have not written their systems to accept the standard, or their system isn't capable of doing it without heavy customization, which is costly. You either do it yourself, which is going to be cost of your developer salaries, or you're going to hire people like us who are expensive to do that work. So it's cheaper to just use this third-party service, which can do that morphing of the document for you. So in this scenario, Walmart would send, they would get the stuff from this frozen food supplier, and their sales orders would come over, and then the sales orders would be brought into the ERP. And now they have now the accounts receivable department has visibility into, okay, this is what we sold to Walmart.
And so your client is the frozen food company that utilizes your ERP system, which is the Microsoft 365 Dynamics system. So ABC frozen food company uses the Microsoft software, and you're like the consultant to help these different customers, like the frozen food company. And so they have a system so that they can send like the PO to Walmart?
Right.
Okay. And so the PO goes to Walmart, basically the purchase order saying, we need, this, and this, or actually, is it?
Sorry.
It's actually the other way around. Oh, wait,
the Walmart is sending the sales order to the client. And they're bringing it in. Yeah.
I see. Because Walmart needs, so it's the other way around. So it's basically, but Walmart, and who knows what system they're using. They may not be using your Microsoft.
Definitely not.
Yeah, they probably have something else. But so Walmart has whatever software system that they use. And then they're like, oh, we have all these orders coming in. We need more frozen foods from ABC Frozen Food Company. So then Walmart creates a purchase order, like your 850 EDI transaction. So Walmart creates a purchase order, and they go, I need this frozen food. I need this frozen food. And then they send that electronically to a third party first before it gets to the your client, the ABC frozen food. So they send it to the third party, and then the third party, you're saying, has to kind of translate it or something? Is it? And then that third party then sends that purchase order over to the frozen food company. They receive it, and then they're like, okay, here's what we need. And so you're saying that by being able to do this through Bitcoin SV, you could eliminate that third party potentially?
You could either eliminate them or drastically reduce the cost of it. Ideally, you would get rid of them and you would just do the support on either side. But that support would be much less effort because you would have full visibility into what each side sent versus black box where these guys are just transforming it. So you don't see what Walmart sent, right? You just see what the third party gave you. But in the Bitcoin part, you both have access to that document on the chain, so you can see. So you're able to take a look at exactly where things went wrong. So you can much more easily support it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big key thing to have, is to be able to see it. So it's like transparent, really, is what it is. Right. I mean, that's kind of what Bitcoin SV really is it's about transparency, about an open ledger where everyone can see. It can be private, right. And so, which I think you were talking about how there's benefits to using Bitcoin over like Hyperledger, right? Can you explain a little bit about, how you were kind of Hyperledger and why, that's private, and why the public Bitcoin SV ledger is better? I mean,
right.
You were mentioning.
It's been kind of a raging debate and a topic of discussion I've had with people in my company because, that's all the rage right now with a lot of enterprises. Hyperledger, blockchain, blah, 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 right? But to use a public one that everyone has access to makes much more sense. And you would just make it more private by essentially just giving the people the keys. So the reason one of the good examples I can think of is trust. So in a private system, someone has access to it or someone controls that chain. So for example, in Hyperledger, it's the people who can read and write from it, right? But what's stopping those guys from colluding and then getting the government involved and saying, hey, look what we did? Now, sure, in effect, that could be the same on Bitcoin SV, but I would say the incentives are much different because in SV, it's out there for everyone to see. So, I mean, yeah, you are doing a subset through encryption, but it can't be deleted, right? Now, Hyperledger, if I'm assuming that they collude, they could do whatever, right? They could lie, they could do whatever. But if they're using SV, it literally cannot be deleted or updated. It can't be fudged. I would say, this might be a reach, but your incentive to lie might be greater in a private scenario because you see the government's actually giving grants for blockchain technology. You could just say, all right, let's just collude and show them we're using blockchain, but totally make stuff up just to show it to them. right? And they look at it and say, oh, you know, you guys use blockchain, that means you're not lying, great, whatever. But in fact, it's mutable. It's not immutable. But if you use Bitcoin, it truly is. So
Mhm.
your incentive to lie is much lower. At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like that those are some real benefits there to be able to, and like you said, as far as, you know, maybe eliminating or reducing the role of having third parties involved, that's a benefit. I mean, that's a reduction. And just the
Right.
transaction fees alone being, you know, it'll be so much more reduced.
Yeah, with the Hyperledger thing, I guess it's really the difference is the hash power and the miners, because in the Hyperledger I haven't looked too much into how they reach consensus, but I know it's not decentralized hash power, that's for sure.
Mhm.
It's not millions of dollars invested into that like Craig talks about so much. It's more of these guys control the network.
Mm.
Maybe it's immutable in terms of, just what they say, but in reality, right, it could be more. But
Mhm.
when you have truly decentralized hash power where these guys just take the data, they don't know what it is, they
Mhm.
just know you're paying them and they just put it in.
Mhm.
That's more trustworthy,
Mhm.
because you don't have to trust anyone. It's just, the incentives are just aligned.
Mhm. And you hear a lot about how Bitcoin is not anonymous. It's more pseudonymous and private. What do you think? Well, and when you compare that with like Hyperledger, I don't know if Hyperledger is considered, is it anonymous, or I don't know if you even know the answer to that, if how it relates.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because with them, I mean, so for example, if I'm using just most companies use my own private database that only I have access to,
Mhm.
I don't have to give that up to anyone. It's mine, right?
Mhm.
Um, I guess the same way works for Hyperledger.
Mhm.
Um, those guys control it. They don't have to give access to anyone else.
Mhm.
But what if they're doing, all sorts of stuff like, I don't know, money laundering, fudging records?
Mhm.
So I guess, yeah, that goes back to the point I made earlier, is if they're fudging records, you would never know because it's a private system.
Mhm.
Right? It's just like one company using a single SQL database, except you just got a bunch of people writing to one database. That's what a private blockchain is.
Mhm.
But with Bitcoin, it's public. So even though stuff's encrypted, it's pseudonymous in the fact that, okay, you can trace the transactions if you know what you're looking for. That's the whole point of it, is to
Mhm.
give that visibility in case you are doing something wrong.
Mhm.
Like that's how the Silk Road guy got caught, for example.
Oh,
And that's
who got caught? Who?
Silk Road.
Oh, right. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's another reason, is they're much more accountable, because their stuff can end up being traced if they end up doing something bad. If they're not doing anything wrong, no one will ever know who's sending that stuff, and no one's ever going to look into it.
Mhm.
But if you do find out, okay, you start seeing, okay, this address to this okay, oh, that's associated with um, frozen food supplier Z, right? They're laundering money to whatever, some bank.
Mhm.
But if you're using a private chain, you could just do that stuff all day. It's
Mhm.
no different than using a private database.
Yeah. So I guess that's the benefit of Bitcoin, is that it's more transparent
Hmm.
and open and immutable. So, and you can't just change it and delete it and collude. It just makes things work better, I guess, is compared to something like private Hyperledger blockchain, it seems.
Right. And it's more of an economic thing, which, that's another topic of what, most people have a low understanding of economics. So, they just look at facts, or they just look at, um, more from a straightforward example, but they don't look at the incentives. Okay, if you change something, if you go towards something, what are the additional impacts of that? So with the private, what incentives do you change by having this group of 5 companies using some database? What happens when someone makes a mistake? What happens when someone lies? Are they going to rewrite it? Are they going to all agree to say, okay, actually, we're just going to be honest?
Mhm.
What are they going to do? And then compare that to if they're all using Bitcoin. What are they going to do when they have something that is truly cannot be fudged?
Mhm.
So you have to look at the human action piece of it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, you know, when you first started looking into Bitcoin and following it, what were, I guess, which coins were you following, and did you change, and was there reasons why you might have switched from one to the other? If you can kind of tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first, in late 2017, of course, I was looking at BTC, Bitcoin Core. And but at that point, my knowledge was very limited and raw. So I just heard the normal things. I read the white paper, you know, peer-to-peer cash, it's fast, you know, instant transactions, zero comp, all that sort of stuff. Starting to look into mining. And I was that way. So I was on the BTC side, but not because I knew what the other sides were, but I also bought some other alt or shit coins, right? Like EOS, Dash, Litecoin. I had like 10 at one point. But the change for me, and I had even, you know, I was on our Bitcoin and saw that, you know, that Bitcoin Cash forked, and they decided to increase the block size. And I wasn't some rabid core supporter, but I even forsook all my computer science knowledge and think, oh, you know, they just increased the block size. That doesn't seem like a scaling solution. Just not thinking, right? Just being group think, right? You know, reading our Bitcoin thinking, oh yeah, that's great, you know, whatever. But on May, there's a YouTuber named Ivan on Tech who I used to pay attention to. He interviewed Roger Ver, and I had heard about Roger Ver, oh, scammer, you know, all this stuff, liar, felon, whatever.
And this is May 2018?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was kind of the change point for me, because I did not understand why they kept calling this dude all these names. And then I listened to him talk. I listened to what he had to say, and you know, it just made sense at the time, right? This is you know, almost a year ago now. So I started looking into Bitcoin Cash. I started to see all the history and the craziness, like with the block size debate, the DDoS attacks on XT, like all this stuff. It's crazy, man. And I think the last straw. So I was on a flight coming home from one of my clients. I downloaded the Lightning white paper on my phone, and I read it. And I got through it. It took a while, and that paper is so ridiculous. That was the last straw. After I read that shit, I sold all my BTC for Bitcoin Cash. I still had my other crap coins, and slowly over time I started looking in like Charlie Lee, how Dash is like an oligarchy. I just slowly started divesting into Bitcoin Cash.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, that Lightning, that was the last straw for me. And then I started using Bitcoin Cash. Like I started using yours, Memo. My mind was blown at how quick it was. You know, there's no replace by fee, none of that crap. It doesn't take forever for your crap to confirm. It's no 30-cent dollar fees, right? It's less than a penny. I'm trying to think what else. And then the hash war happened, right? So
yes.
That was, yeah. So that was probably my most frustrating time. That was more frustrating than the core stuff, because it was so clear to me that the path that nChain wanted to take was the correct path to scale, especially coming from the business perspective. I think that's the biggest difference between SV and Bitcoin Cash is those guys who support it clearly have never worked with an enterprise client, have never worked in real business because it's the points we talked about earlier with scale and that sort of thing. But there's one other thing I wanted to bring up about so when I got out in Silicon Valley, at first we had a meetup down in San Jose before the SF one. And I went to one, and at that time, even though I was on Bitcoin Cash, I never really paid attention to Craig Wright. So that was the same kind of scenario where I wasn't against him, but I just heard stuff and just believed it. I didn't really think about it, you know, especially I'd heard that Africa video about, you know, I have more money than your whole country or whatever. But I want to talk about that in a bit. But anyway, one of the guys that was there, he's my friend now.
At the San Francisco, you're talking about the San Francisco Bitcoin Cash meetup?
No, this was one we had in San Jose.
Oh, the Bitcoin SV meetup after the hash war?
This is before the hash war.
and so, okay, and what meetup was it? It was just,
It was one that we started kind of grassroots. It doesn't exist anymore because now it's the SV one, but it was
okay,
before Hash 4, so it was just a very small one.
okay.
But this guy, he's my friend now. He said, I'll never forget this. He said, you know, he started talking about Craig Wright. He's like, I cannot find a single thing I disagree with him on. And he said that, I started watching all Craig's stuff, and I watched his honor presentation. I mean, I got so hyped one time watching that because he started talking about the craziness with core. I was just, this is it. Like this dude knows what he's talking about. And I'm glad that we have someone that doesn't care what other people think.
Mm-hmm.
He says whatever's on his mind, and I think that we need that. We need some like a wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's kind of where I got to SV. But to touch on that Africa video, because that's one that's used in an argument against him. If you actually watch that whole thing, his message is actually positive. It's not negative. It's, yeah, everyone looks at that one little quote, but his message is actually saying, it's ridiculous that I have more money than your whole country because you don't open up your borders to trade, right? If you opened up, he's talking about what Bitcoin could do for them. But it's just, one of those social media manipulation type things. Is I encourage people, watch the whole video, and you see that he's actually talking just sound economics and how they need to change,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. There's so much that he says that I agree with, and he knows so much. And I mean, just like you said, people are using his technology to integrate with their projects, like you said, with your EDI project. And so, and I think there's so many more patents, I think, that are going to be coming out, from what I understand, that will be able to, like yourself, will be able to access that instead of having to spend all that money to try and figure all this out. To make their project better. And so did we talk about the Bitcoin SV meetup that you kind of started? I don't know if we did that. Okay, yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
So there was a Bitcoin Cash San Francisco meetup. So it hadn't had one in a while, but we did have one on November 15th. Mm-hmm. So the day of the hash war, we had it. So me, my friend that I just told you about, another guy that we did the San Jose one, we went up to San Francisco. That's the day I actually met Ryan. I met Jason from Memo. And that was the last one that was united. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of people at that one. I mean, it was a pretty good time, but there was definitely some controversy, right? Because, like Shama, the ABC developer, he was there. So I would say it's kind of split down the middle of, who's on what side. But mm-hmm. it was pretty interesting. But that was the last Bitcoin Cash San Francisco meetup. So,
it was November 15th.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So then we went to the Coingeek Conference. So I went to the Coingeek one in London. Uh-huh. And that was a life-changing event for me. I mean, I met so many people, just learn about what can be done with Bitcoin and all that. And I was very motivated. So I started talking with Ryan and Jason from Memo. I mean, he comes to the meetup, but he's not involved in organizing it. But basically, I was saying, we got to do this meetup. Like, we got to start our own. We just, forget those guys, right? We don't need to try to merge it. We just need to do our own thing. Mm-hmm. So me, Ryan, and one of my friends down here in San Jose named Sonnen, the guy I mentioned who runs the print shop, we organized the Bitcoin SV San Francisco meetup. And we started that in December. Mm-hmm. And we've had it monthly ever since. I think the first or second one got covered by Coingeek in an article. Oh, uh-huh. So I guess we should link that in the description of whenever we publish the video.
Oh, yeah.
So we started that, and it's SV only, and those have been going really well. Ryan sponsors it with Money Button, so shout out to him. That's great. And then me and Sonu handle more of the logistics of it. And we've been rotating with our presentations of the meetups. And next month, not next month, 2 weeks from now, I'll be doing my Unwriter presentation at the San Francisco meetup. It's similar to one I'll be doing at CoinGeek, except I'll probably add more stuff because I know Unwriter will come out with more by then. Mm-hmm. and we won't record it. So to make it, exclusive for both sides.
Do you have a chance to maybe mention a few of the Unwriter projects that you're excited about, and what? Because I believe you were saying that you're using Bitpipe for your EDI project, and one of the things I noticed about that too is that in your yours.org article talking about the EDI project, that the client does not have to own Bitcoin in order to use the EDI software. Can you explain that real quick before you get into Unwriter?
Yep, sure. So
Okay.
the Bitpipe, I even mentioned in some of my posts, that's probably my favorite one of his tools, because you can just run that on a computer or on a server. And for people to interact with it, they don't need Bitcoin. All they need to do is make just the HTTP request, which all programming languages can do, JavaScript, C#, even the one Microsoft has for the ERP. They can all do that. They're all capable of doing it. So just make a request to that endpoint, and then that endpoint, which is Bitpipe, will take that message, put it on chain, but it can also transform it. So it can change it to whatever. Or it could just put it directly on chain. And then that way someone else can just look at the chain and then pick it up and take it, do whatever they need to with it. So it's a good way, if someone can come up with some business use case, it's a good way to get a customer who has relatively large volume to use this service, but they don't even need to know. They don't even need to know that they're using Bitcoin. I mean, you could be sly like that because, if you bring up Bitcoin, they might laugh at you, unfortunately. But you could bring that up to say, hey, I just have this API endpoint that you can hit to transmit data securely. And that's possible with Bitpipe. And you don't have to tell them. Just don't even mention Bitcoin. Just say, hey, use this.
And then how do they pay the transaction fee?
So the person operating the Bitpipe pays the transaction fees. So what they would have to do is monetize it. So they would have to say, hey, if you want to use my Bitpipe, you need to pay me $15 a month. Something like that.
Okay. And so I wonder how that can integrate with your project. So for example, you've got ABC Frozen Food Company who works with Walmart, and they're doing POs, or something. So can you somehow benefit in that way? So if you like me, for example, let's say I'm like, oh, I want to have a Bitpipe business. I don't know, so how would that work? I mean, could that somehow work with that? So
that's the nature. Yeah, that's how I'm planning. When we talked about the proof of concept between two ERPs, that's the way I'm gonna try to push it. So, I mean, even though in reality, we would never have two dynamic systems integrating. I mean, it's unlikely. It's just unlikely simply because it's rare that you would have some company on one side using the same exact software as another company, one of their partners, right? It's just unlikely.
Yes.
But with that said, what I could do is use that Bitpipe to do the transformation. So let's say I send an HTTP request to my Bitpipe and say, invoice number, invoice description, quantity, item, amount, dollar amount. I can then change that to say maybe a CSV file in the Bitpipe code, and then push it to another system because they take CSVs, if that makes sense. That's what Bitpipe can do. So I plan on leveraging Bitpipe for that proof of concept because I can just change it to something that the other system accepts. So basically, I'm automating what these third parties do for a fraction of the cost.
So would that mean with your company, well, whoever your company, if it's your company or, but your consulting company or whatever, but you would be probably having a Bitpipe instance. Is that what you call it? Or a Bitpipe instance. So that means you somehow would just allow that information to be pushed in through Bitpipe?
I would send it from system A and then do whatever I need to with it so that system B can accept it. And then I can either push it or I can just let system B go look at the chain.
So that would be a business that you'd be doing, is you'd be a Bitpipe instance. Is that what you'd call it?
Pretty much, yeah. You just run a server and just run Bitpipe.
Uh-huh. Huh. And that ends up going on chain through that way.
The mechanism for transport is, yeah, using the SV. So, because when they send that transaction, Bitpipe can do whatever with it, but it puts it on the chain.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you, of course, you would have to be able to send. And so when you're working with ABC Frozen Food Company, because that's your client, and then you're basically would say, okay, you pay me a certain amount a month to send these transactions, or how would that work? How would you collect the money, and what would they pay you with? Would they pay you US dollars? How would that work?
Yeah, they could pay me in fiat, which everyone has. So I could get paid in fiat to make them use Bitcoin.
Uh-huh. And then, but then you have to pay Bitcoin, like BSV to, who would you pay? I mean, how would that work from there?
I just pay the minor fees, that's it.
You just pay the minor fees.
For each transaction, which is going to be nowhere near $15. Even if, I mean, what does their volume need to be for one client to, and then, you can raise that price. Just make it cheaper than the third-party service.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, that's pretty much getting rid of the third-party service? Yeah. Oh, wow. How much do you think it costs a month? I mean, how does that work? What's the fee for a third-party service?
I don't know the fees, but I can just say this, that client that I was talking about, when I left, they were talking about, because they were taking on support themselves, but they were still using them. But they were having resource constraints on their side.
For example, like the ABC Frozen Food Company is like the ABC company is having constraints, right? Okay, go on.
So sorry, I know I keep saying they. It's too familiar with me. The client, they had their manager's time, their technical manager, and then one of their sysadmin was spending half their time supporting the EDI stuff with the third party. They were taking so much of their time up that they told me by the end of the year they were going on support. So they were about to increase their bill for the support company, right? What I'm talking about is getting rid of those guys. Get rid of it. Just kill it. And then, reduce the support costs from your resources, right? Because it'll be much simpler. That's the value proposition I see.
I see. Because what they were just like, wow, this is taking up so much of our time. Like the client, the ABC Frozen Food Company, for example, that they're like, we just need to get another service, a support service.
Well, they would just contract the same people, but have them do support.
Okay.
So they take it completely off. But that's going to increase their bill.
Oh, through the third party company. Mm-hmm. So instead of, okay, I see. So basically just saying, hey, third party, like ABC client would say, gosh, this is taking up so much of our time. Oh, this is crazy. We're just going to hire you, the third party company, to do the support. And that's a lot more expensive for them that third party company to take over the support.
Right.
So it's like increasing the bill even more, and you're just like, when you're saying, hey, why do that? Do it through me, like your company, your consulting company, for example.
Or
right?
whatever, yeah.
Or whoever, and really you just be using Bitpipe. I mean, like you're basically just replacing the third party, and just doing Bitpipe instead. Is that the main difference?
Yeah. I mean, now we're talking about a very simple, low-level terms, but at scale, yeah, that's the type of stuff I see happening. It's just you take all that crap away. I mean, because Bitcoin can do it faster, cheaper, more securely.
Wow. And what kind of what is involved in your side of things as far as like what do you have to do you just have to get it set up.
So if I was the owner of the Bitpipe instance, the only thing I would need to do is do the transformation. So you would have to write code for that. So if you have multiple clients, because if you say company A sending me CSVs and company B only accepts XML, I would have to write that. Mm-hmm. So you would just have to build that in per your client's needs.
Okay.
So that's your labor.
I see. So it's you have to potentially customize, spend a little bit of time and labor to customize it so that, because it's like, oh, this over here, this company is using this software or whatever format, I guess you could say. This company is using this format. they're needing to send it over here to this format or something. So you need to take your labor and somehow make it work to where it's customized to where they kind of talk to each other in a way.
Right.
And then you use the Bitpipe instance for that, I guess.
Right. And the best part about that is because I'm using Bitcoin, I don't need a database. I don't need all this crazy software because I'm just using Bitcoin. So that server, it doesn't need much resources at all. It could be a very cheap server. I mean, I was running Bitpipe on my Surface, my Microsoft Surface. It's so, it doesn't do anything. I mean, it's just, I mean, yeah, you would need to process volume, but, you know, so that's when we're talking about, you know, miners versus full nodes, that sort of thing. But that would literally be the only thing the machine needs to do is to run that Bitpipe. You don't need a database. You don't need it because Bitcoin is your database.
Uh-huh. Huh. Wow. And the way they're using it now, is it like they're using a server? Like when they're not using Bitcoin, are they using like a server? Like what's the difference between what they'd be doing right now, like a server versus, you know, if they go through you, they're using Bitcoin. Like what is the difference? It's just
that third party is most certainly using probably multiple servers with multiple databases to keep track of all that stuff. Because their clients are not just company A, company B. They have many more that are using them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And their costs are high.
I see. So that company, the third party, they have all these servers that they're spending money on. So they got to pass along that cost.
Keep track of all the documents, all these files. They got to keep track of all that. They got to store them, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much does that cost?
Okay, I see.
Well, in this case, it would just be all on chain.
Okay. So it's just a matter of, and once you get the labor into it to do all the customizing to get it to talk, I guess, together or talk to each other, then you're pretty much, that's about it. I mean, other than, you know, maybe just assisting them here and there for questions.
Now, yeah, the hurdle there is getting the other side to pick that data up from the chain. That's going to be a hard sell, but it's cheaper for them too because they're not also using a third party. Now it's just on the public ledger for them to just take and ingest into their system.
And then when you're saying that side that, you know, we'll have to convince them, would that be like the Walmart or would that be the third party?
That would be the Walmart in this scenario.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, because we're eliminating the third party. So we don't need them anymore, right? So, okay, I see. But yeah, and it may not, you know, Walmart's big, but there's other companies out there that probably, I don't know, I wonder, they could probably save money too. I don't know, or maybe, I wonder what benefits that there would be for the Walmarts of the world to be willing to allow you to do that with your client. Like, is there benefits to them? I don't know.
Yeah, because they're using that same service. And they're paying, I bet their bill is much higher because they're forcing the same thing on all their supply, on all the people who supply them.
Okay. So everyone's going to save. So you're saying the frozen food company will save, you know, and they can maybe cut out the third party that they have to deal with, not have to worry about like spending lots of money on support through the third party. Like that's like even more expensive. Not even talking about support, you know, cutting out the third party. And then the other side, like the Walmart, they're saving too.
Now the costs, there might be significant upfront costs because now they're going to have to change their integration to go look at the chain versus taking documents from this third party. So there's going to be some upfront development costs, and there's going to be more internal support in the scenario we're talking about. So it's not, you know, a utopia or anything, but in the long run, it would be much cheaper for sure, 100%.
And, you know, that's definitely, you know, your business, you'll be keeping busy with your business doing all that too. And so
yeah, if I could convince my company about this stuff,
yeah, that's big. And if you do that, then I wonder if that word spreads like there's plenty of other companies that are using Microsoft 365 Dynamics, right? I don't know how that news would spread to others, but
I'm sure it would spread like wildfire.
Yeah, and if there's any benefit to other, because I guess there's other consultants just like you that use Microsoft 365 Dynamics, I guess. And
so for example, we're the largest U.S. Microsoft partner that resells 365. But that's just US.
Mhm.
The market for it is much bigger in Europe, for example. But yeah, I mean, we're a pretty big one. But yeah, there's a bunch of other partners who do the same thing we do, and obviously we're in competition with them.
I see. Wow. So did you want to explain anything else about like what you're doing before I don't know if you have time to talk about some of the things of Unwriter, but was there any other projects or anything you wanted to add about your projects?
Oh yeah. The last one I did was selling digital content on chain. So I actually bought a mic for this meeting. I bought the Blue Yeti one. But
that's what I have too.
yeah. But to my surprise, there was a PC code for Assassin's Creed in there. But my video game plan has fallen through the floor since I've been obsessed with Bitcoin. So I'm never going to play that. So, but I would like to sell it, right? I would like to sell it for Bitcoin. So I was going crazy. How do I do this? So I wrote a Yoast post about it. I didn't end up solving it, but I had it pretty close. But essentially, I mean, there's a way I could do it, but I don't want to use that method. So I'll just talk about it briefly. So the issue is, what I wanted to do is I wanted to sell this code through MoneyButton, but host a web page on chain. I wanted to not use a server. And this is part of the presentation about Unwriter stuff that people will get to see about server versus not using a server. So if I do that, I can put the code behind a paywall, but all someone has to do is look at the code and they'll see the code and they'll just be able to grab it without having to swipe the money button. So that's not going to work. Now I could use yours to do it because they use authentication, or I could use what the guy from BitPace did. I think his username is Libetix or something. He made a paywalls on chain. He's using encryption through it. So I could use that, right? But I don't know if you see the issue with me using that. The issue is that nothing prevents someone else from swiping the money button and seeing that code, even though it's already been redeemed. So I need it to destroy itself, essentially. Like I need it to, if I'm going to do it on chain, I need it to go away. Like I need someone to swipe that button, but one time. It can only be swiped once. But that's the part I did solve. So with Planaria, you can do that. So basically what you do with Planaria is you say, all right, it's like a state machine. So Unwriter uses the example of a turnstile. So, a turnstile can be open or closed, right? If you open it, it goes back to closed. If you're opening it, it's open, right? But it just changes, and it's locked or whatever, right? And he spoke about that more eloquently on his blog post than I just did. But, it's got two states or whatever. You can do that with money button. So you can have an enabled money button or a disabled money button. But how do you do that on chain? It would be trivial if you're running your own server. Well, with Planaria, I can say, all right, if I've seen a unique Bitcoin transaction, make the money button disabled. If I have not seen a unique Bitcoin transaction, make it enabled. So that's what I did. So, but the only way I write that unique Bitcoin transaction is when someone swipes that money button. So as soon as someone swipes the money button, it disables itself. It's dead. It dies. If that makes sense. Okay. That's what Planaria is. It's like a state machine. It's like, okay, in one sense, based on the previous Bitcoin transactions, it's alive. It's enabled. But as soon as I swipe it, because I write that unique transaction, when they swipe, now it's dead. Because the money button looks to see, did this transaction come in? And it only does it when someone swiped it. So that's how I solve the one-time thing. But the encryption part, I'm being greedy. I don't want to give Libetix or Ryan 10% of my sales from the digital code. So, but I think I've been meaning to reach out to the guy who did BitPace to see I could do it on his product, but I need to be able to modify the money button. And I can't do that the way he has it now, which I'm sure he didn't think about. It's just, I don't think, of course he wouldn't, right? Because I think that was, I'm not sure. It's just, he was doing encryption. So I'm not talking bad about him or anything. I'm just trying to say that you wouldn't have thought to let your users customize it, right? If they're just using your service.
Okay. And the whole point is that you wanted to sell, was it digital content you said?
A digital PC code that you can redeem one time.
Okay. And so you're thinking maybe BitPaste might be the way to go, or?
BitPaste, yeah, it will work because he's encrypting it. So I could do it. But the issue is that if somebody else comes, like let's say I announce it, hey, this is for sale.
Huh.
Someone else comes behind the person who bought it and they try to swipe it, they're going to pay me, but the code is no longer valid. So now I have to refund them. And that's a manual process that I don't want to deal with.
Okay.
I need it to be one time. Like you swipe it one time and then that's it.
Okay. So the solution is you would use Planaria.
Mm-hmm.
And then what else to make that? Can you repeat?
Oh yeah, sure. So the money button, it's only going to be, it will be disabled so long as I have not seen a certain type of Bitcoin transaction.
Okay.
But the Bitcoin transaction that I'm looking for comes from that money button being swiped.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as someone swipes that money button, the first time, that money button will be disabled from there on because the Bitcoin transaction is in the chain.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Okay, and you're using Planaria to do it.
Yes.
Okay, and that's one of the things that you like about Planaria is it allows you to do that. So basically the technologies that you'll be using in order to do it it's still money button would be involved, right? Okay, money button, Planaria, and what the BitPaste too, or no?
Ideally I would like to use BitPaste.
Mm-hmm. Those three technologies, I mean, like kind of using that to be able to do it.
And one thing that Unwriter has been adamant about is really almost all his tools kind of roll up to Planaria. So like he doesn't even want people to talk about BitDB or BitSocket because it's Planaria now. They're all combined together. Now that only applies to a few things. Like it doesn't apply to Bitpipe or the data pay or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the majority of what he's done rolls into Planaria.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So he's probably done like Unwriter's done separate projects,
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like making them individually, like, BitDB and, all these things. But now he's kind of like putting them all under one thing, which is Planaria, basically. And what is Planaria? What is it? Do you have a quick description of what it does or what it is?
I'll try to. I know I had to read his blog like 8 times before I think I started to understand it. But it's basically you take a summation of what's happened on Bitcoin to do something. So you write code to do whatever based on what's happened in the Bitcoin transaction. You're looking at Bitcoin, right? You're looking at all the transactions that have taken place, or certain ones, whatever. The ones you need, you're just looking for that. You're filtering on those. And then you do something based on when Bitcoin transactions come in. But because you're looking at what's taken place in the past, when new transactions come in, they can morph what you do in the future. So he gives an example with Schrodinger's cat, having it be dead and alive at the same time. It's like, if I have 2 different machines running Planaria with different code bases, I can say, oh, based on one history of Bitcoin transactions, do X, but I can have the code do something else with the same set of Bitcoin transactions that would result in the cat being dead. Or, on the first example, it would be alive, for example. But that's how I used it to do the one-time money button that kills itself after the first use. But I guess a good way to think about it was, if for example, with our ERP systems, most companies take nightly backups of their database. Okay, but those are huge files. They're like gigabytes in size. And if you're taking them nightly, that's expensive to be able to keep storage of all that. With Planaria, it ports. So if I have my system built on Planaria, even though I am keeping a local database, it's just a summation of Bitcoin transactions. So I could easily stop running that server. Like if that server gets blown up, I could just take the Planaria code and then put it on another machine, and I'm right back to where I was without needing a bunch of huge backups because the backend is just Bitcoin.
Okay.
So that's one way I could think about it. And Unwriter goes through his examples on his documentation, which is super well written.
Yeah, and then I remember seeing, you know, just some of the earlier yours.org article on some of the earlier things that he was working on, she. Do we know if it's a he or a she?
The best theory I've seen, I'll probably just leave to my presentation because I put it in there.
Okay. But I guess BitDB it was like the database.
Right.
I guess. And that a lot of the things like Genesis, Babel, Chronos, Meta, those are all BitDB, right?
Yeah, but now that's just going to be one half of Planaria.
Okay.
Like all those are just Planaria. They're just Planaria, different applications of Planaria. That's all they are.
So, and you've got, like, I remember you were saying in your article that you've got like the Chronos, which is basically a subset of the BitDB, which is the database that's used to keep track of the timestamps.
Yep.
I guess. So I mean, those are some of the first things, and then the Babel, which was also BitDB. You're saying that's basically written in Operaturn?
Which one?
The Babel?
Oh yeah, that one only looks at Operaturn data.
Okay, I see.
We filtered it down.
I see. So any kind of data in the Operaturn, that's where Babel is looking in.
Yes.
Look, okay.
It's only looking at that.
And and then one last thing I wanted to talk about, if you have time, which is the some of the, you know, the stress test.
Oh yeah.
Actually, the user activated stress test and some of the photos that you were uploading and how you did it. And I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to add about the Unwriter, though.
One of the best things that I think he's come out with is, and I can speak to this. So going back to where I was talking about trying to do the EDI with Bitcoin.com's APIs at the time, pre-fork. At that time, we did not have a good way to write a Bitcoin transaction from some system. So if I wanted to do it from the ERP, I was having to write this long, crazy code. I was having to do all this crap that is redundant, like all the signing logic, maintaining the UTXO set. Like, it's crazy. It's just not, it's too much work. Like, why am I having to do so much coding just to broadcast a transaction? Well, Unwriter released DataPay, which is you write to the chain in like 5 lines of code. It just takes all that stuff away from the dev and just makes it simple.
Wow.
And I think people with that's the best place for developers looking to get in, because I've seen a lot of social media posts and the Telegrams and the Slacks about, hey, I don't know how to code, but I want to start. DataPay. Just look at that. Anyone can take that and they can run with it, and then you think, you know, the floodgates will open from there. Because if they can just see, all right, I can write a transaction in 5 lines, you know, what else can I do, right? And then they'll just start Googling and learning and figuring stuff out. So that's the quickest way to onboard a Bitcoin developer, just have them look at DataPay.
Because in a nutshell, DataPay is, what does it do?
It's JavaScript code that writes, you can pay someone or you can write data to Operaturn.
Okay, I see.
But you can do much more with it. But I'm just talking about the simple pieces of it.
Okay. And is there anything else that that stands out for that you might be utilizing, or?
I won't use this. Actually, I might. But the C protocol he did, I think, solves a huge issue. So what that does is so the way people have been writing files to the chain is they've been using the protocol he came out with, which is Beat. So it just basically says, all right, you know, it just describes how that file is written to the chain and how all these node sites like BitPaste, Bico.media, how they're showing you the files, Bitstagram. It uses that B protocol. C hashes the file contents of stuff that's from the B protocol. So if you create a hash, that is provably the original file. So one issue that people have had in Bitcoin is they download these wallets that end up getting changed from what the developer released, and it ends up stealing all their Bitcoin.
Oh.
This C solves that problem. It takes the trust away from the developer, because if you can map the hash to the original file, you know it's the one. 100%. It's just cryptography and math. It's not trust the developer. So it completely fixes that problem.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And so we had the user activated kind of stress test is what, I don't know if Ryan Charles came up with that.
Ryan, and I think the guy Skylark Cash, he's one of the guys on Twitter. I think they came up with that.
Okay. And so they basically, Ryan Charles wanted to, he just kind of started uploading a lot of photos in the beginning, and I guess he's uploaded at least a gigabyte of data.
He wrote a blog post on nChain where he said how much he's uploaded. Yeah, but I think it's gigabytes at this point.
Oh, even more than a couple of gigabytes. Gigabytes, plural. And so have you. I mean, you've actually uploaded some, images and things on chain to the Bitcoin blockchain, right?
Yep. So that first UAST that we did, I tried to participate, but I know I was running into issues like other people. So like a bunch of other people. So I took a bunch of photos I took from my Switzerland, Italy, and Japan trips I took last year, and I had a bunch staged up, but I think I only managed to upload maybe 40 megabytes. And the reason for that was issues with Money Button and all these quote unquote full nodes that we have running on the network that haven't updated their op return size limit. So Ryan's hit hard the topic of the Money Button, being able to upload these huge files. But the thing that he did was he really has increased the scalability of that Money Button, because I uploaded a bigger file yesterday, and it was much faster than it was before.
So here's here's your Joshua Henslee's yours.org article, my photos from user activated stress test on Sunday, March 24, 2019. And that was before they got the 128 megabyte block, I think. I can't remember if this was the week where they were kind of getting like 50,
yes, that's it.
40 to 50 megabytes in a block. And we're like, oh, wow, this is a big block, and this is like real organic. I mean, this is real stuff. This isn't just like, on testnet or anything. This is real back then. And so you've uploaded some of these photos from Italy, looks like. So that's about like 19 photos I think I saw. I counted them. They look very nice. So you kind of ran into some issues as far as with what? Money Button, or what would you call it?
So the first limit that everyone knows about is the unchained transactions. So if you try to spend 25 unconfirmed transactions, you'll just start getting rejections from broadcasting that transaction. So I know that's a big bottleneck that nChain, the node software developers are working on. But the other one that people started running into was scaling issues with the Money Button itself. That people were trying to swipe them too fast, or I was getting an odd error that I did report to Ryan, and I'm pretty sure he fixed. Because like I said, I went to do this yesterday, and I was able to swipe all the Money Buttons much faster. So the value that this added was it not only exposed these nodes on the network that don't have their op return limit, because we were seeing issues with transactions propagating as well, but it exposed limitations in Money Button software that Ryan wrote, because he optimized it so much afterwards. So if we hadn't done that, it's better to figure out that stuff today than it is later, when a lot of people start swiping Money Button and they're like, what the hell, I can't use my money. So we got it just from uploading some freaking vacation photos on the chain, right? And now, now he's fixed a scaling issue in his software. So it's value add right there.
Yeah, and is it the speed limit sometimes? I mean, I remember.
Yeah, that's the unconfirmed.
Okay, so that's because I remember when I was trying to do some money button swipes on Bitstagram, and I think I ran into a speed limit issue or something. Does that happen sometimes? I mean, well, in the past it probably did.
Yeah, but there's a way to bypass it because he lets you split your stuff. You can split your UTXOs before, and then you shouldn't hit it if you split it enough.
Mm-hmm. And so do you still have to do that? You still need to split your own UTXOs as of today to, upload. And then didn't he do something where you could do a multi swipe or something where
I don't think that's implemented yet. I know that's something he's talking about putting in, but I don't think that's live yet.
Okay. So at this time, it's still just swipe, swipe, swipe.
You can do it much faster now.
Okay. So he's at least changed that, updated that part of it. So it's easier to just swipe, 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 swipe faster.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh. Where before it's just like, oh, and then
it goes one at a time and wait, and then do.
Then you get the little. You'd have to wait for the thing to go around and go ding, and you go. Here's the little like.
You don't have to wait anymore. You can just keep swiping.
Okay. But he's working on it where you could. I wonder how he's going to do that. Where.
Yeah, I know.
You just. God, it wasn't that long ago. Just like, not that many months ago, where he was like, I am creating money button. I remember sitting. I was having like dinner with him, like at one of the Coingeeks, and he's like, oh, talking about money button, and he introduced it. And then he's like, putting all these like, oh, this color, that color, which color is better? Which logo should I use? This wasn't that long ago. And now look at what he's doing with money button. So many more things. I mean, it's not just a way to pay, but isn't it like a API or like an interface to Bitcoin? Or I can't remember what he said, but it's like, is it an API to Bitcoin? Is that what it is?
Yeah, because you can do so much with it. And I mean, I didn't even realize it until a few months ago that you could just change how it works. You can customize it. You can change the messaging on it. You can change who it pays to. You can pay up to 10 people in one swipe if you want to. There's so much you can do with it. Now, one of the recent things I still need to look into is you can log in to a website with Money Button.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I remember back when he came out with Money Button and you could only do, a certain amount, the dollar amount, which was like $5, $10, $25, up to $100. And I have Money Button on my website for Premier Medical Inc., my company. So it's one of the methods that I accept Bitcoin SV for any patient that wants to pay with it. If, their insurance, they have some left over that they need to pay. And so I remember my website I was the first to implement a customized Money Button. Derek Foderick, do you know Derek Foderick? Derek Foderick, he's, I think he's on Slack, but he goes under something like Wheel Mining or something. He has some other name, on Slack, but yeah, so he's on Twitter, D Foderick. He put together some code to customize it because with my business, I can't just say, oh, $5, $10 up to $100. I mean, because my equipment's a lot more expensive, so I had to have it customized back when Money Button didn't have the customization. It was just like up to $100. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. But I remember I was like, oh wow, thought that was fun to be the first one to have a customized Money Button on my website. And but anyway, but just that wasn't that long ago, and now look at all that's happened and so much that you could do. Just think of what can be done in what's going to happen in a year from now. Like, where are we going to be? And because there's a lot of things we have to think about with the halving. The rewards are going to be reduced, and we need to think about the transactions taking over. But I mean, it seems like this can really happen because it's already happening. I mean, the block size is getting full now with 128 megs already. Yeah, so I think that things are just moving fast these days. And, you look at the way they talk about with technology, way back when it was like technology would, it would advance at a certain pace. But now it's just like things advance so much faster. I mean, think about social media and being able to just immediately, instantly, you know, communicate with people, and just how things travel so fast compared to that used to back in the day. And I just think that, wow, there's so much happening on Bitcoin SV, more so than the other chains as far as I can tell. I mean, I don't really keep up with the other chains as much, but it just seems like, I mean, I always think of it as like with, you know, Shatters in his, the unfucking. You heard about that, right? Where it was like, it kind of feels like it's kind of stemmed from the op return, where they kind of figured out a way to get the miner. Well, I guess the default size of op return was something like 220 bytes or something. And they were able to figure out a way to increase it to the 100 kilobyte, right? And so, and then they did that and basically just had the miners agree. You know, they got like 99% of the miners to agree. So then that's what they did. And then suddenly it's like, wow, all this stuff can happen now that you've got a bigger op return. And I mean, but also you said with the optimization, I don't know if they're like working on parallelization. I don't know if that's like on a protocol level or software level, like the nChain, the Bitcoin SV level. Is that like, I'm just wondering what all has been happening that's made 128 megabyte blocks successful? Because, you know, we got things like the gigabit, what was it, gigablock testnet, where people going around like unlimited saying, oh, well, once you get to 22 megabytes, yeah, you're going to be having trouble, right? They kind of ran into.
Yeah, that's because they were running it on these low-level cloud servers, not enterprise. You know, like Craig always says, data centers. They weren't running it. I mean, if you look at the specs, I mean, if someone were to actually look at the specs of what the gigabit testnet was, it was kind of a joke, in my opinion. I'm like, my laptop is just as powerful as that. You know, and we can't be comparing that to real miners, right? But I think what's happening is, you know, you got BMG Pool, CoinGeek, Mempool. These guys are running legit, high-end, you know, super hyper-connected machines. So, I mean, we're seeing that the block propagation is a non-issue. I don't know if any software, it's possible that they've made them. I don't know the specifics behind that to actually help that. But I think it's more of just professional grade miners on the network in terms of, you know, 128. The op return thing, that was actually a config change. So they just increased it from 220 to 100. And they're trying to be safe. In theory, they could increase it to what it was default. But, you know, on 2009 version of Bitcoin. But they're being safe, and they're going to wait to increase that.
And but there's also working on some things. I guess Shatters and Conley, I guess they're working on some things to, I don't know if it's parallelization or if you've kind of followed up with that, or
that doesn't need to be at the protocol level. So let's say a miner parallel you know what I'm trying to say. If they try to do that with multi-thread, that's better. Multi-thread, the processor of the transactions. They don't need to, they don't need to tell everybody that they're doing it, but they won't fork if they're doing that. They can just do it. And then now they have an advantage on everybody. I think that's what you're going to start seeing, is you're going to start seeing these guys do that. Because let's say if I'm nChain with BMG Pool, if I multi-thread my software, why would I release that for everybody to have? Now, maybe they will. I don't know. Because it's probably better that way if everyone has that. But if I was a private miner, you know, maybe if I was Mempool or somebody, and I do that, I multi-thread, I'm not going to tell that to anybody else, because now I can get my block out faster. But I'm not forking, right?
I see.
So I think you'll see optimizations like that, where people just do their own thing that makes them, where they don't deviate from the protocol, but make them be able to get more blocks.
Because I thought I read something about how SV Pool, they hadn't really seen any big blocks being mined by SV.
They weren't mining the big ones, yeah.
Yeah, maybe because of the way, it's just the way they're set up compared
It's
to.
a pool, so it's not like BMG or Coingeek where it's completely private, meaning like they have, whoever owns it, like Calvin, for example, has full control over his pool.
Mm,
SV pool is a community, so it's people all over the world that are joining together.
okay.
So
And
that's
so
how
they may have just like the miners are not as high end as that's what's being.
and they probably just don't even attempt it because they would probably end up losing more money if
Mm,
they tried to.
mm-hmm. I see. So wow. Okay. Um, well, I mean, was there anything else that you wanted to add or about what you're working on, or any thoughts that maybe we might have missed?
Um, no, I mean, I think people will see more with my Unwriter thing,
Hmm.
but they'll just have to be patient because, it's not going to be broadcast till the coin. I don't even know if that'll be, I'm assuming it will. It'll probably, eventually released. But I guess one of the last things I could say is, the scaling SV, making it happen. The only way it's going to work is if people, like myself, yourself, all these other people, if they build and to bring people into it that see the value of it. It's not going to happen just like nChain isn't going to make it happen by themselves. Coingeek is not going to make it happen. They can't. Craig can't do it by himself. Jimmy can't do it by himself. It needs to be people using it and adding value. So it's not guaranteed. The only way it works is if people work, put in the work, make it happen, bring in the transaction volume, and add value to the world. That's the only way it's going to scale.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's something I know I feel like I'm obligated to work towards just because I see the value and I can see how I can make money from it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what will draw people in is that the value proposition of this chain is going to be too overwhelming for even big businesses to ignore. I mean, that's what it's going to be at the end of the day because humans are greedy and they want profits. So that's what's going to attract them to Bitcoin SV.
Mm-hmm. And to be able to make it where your clients or businesses can do it at a cheaper cost, faster, more transparent, all those benefits. The fees are going to be really low on Bitcoin SV and unbounded scale at some point where it will be able to handle the volume. But yeah, like, mm-hmm.
It's also the seen and unseen. So in that example we talked about that frozen foods company paying for support. Well, let's assume the case where they were still doing the support themselves. Well, if I use Bitcoin and they take that support away, what can those resources work on now?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They can do all this other stuff. Or if I'm not paying support to this money, now I can take that money and reinvest it in something else.
Mm-hmm.
So now you start talking about not just Bitcoin itself adding value, but adding value to the company that they didn't before have access to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many benefits. Yeah. So, well, it's really exciting to be able to hear all these projects that you're working on and, real world cases that can, eventually be utilized. I mean, I would imagine, you may find that there are going to be customers that may want to, use you for your services and it'll just make Bitcoin continue to grow. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and explain, everything that you're working on. And I'm really looking forward to watching your presentation at the Coingeek Conference to see, because there's so much that's happening, especially with Unwriter, and to have someone like yourself be able to explain it, it's really nice to, so, and I'd like to, hear more about it later, as things progress with your projects, with EDI, your one-page checkout, and, the other project that you were talking about for selling the digital content online and being able to figure out how to do it with, where no one else can get it. So yeah, those are all great things. So, so good luck with, working on those projects. So
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about this stuff.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, thanks again for all your time and looking forward to talking to you soon.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Joshua. Okay. Bye.